So, Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 16 of the Gita Sandesh program. We're almost at the very end of our 18-day session. I hope it's been a wonderful journey for all of you, discovering our most beautiful, cherishable scriptures, the topmost of which is definitely the Bhagavad Gita. Um, the Bhagavad Gita comes alive when great acharyas write their commentaries on the various shlokas and allow you to go much deeper into the scripture than we could have done on our own. Our minds are very feeble, our intelligence is sometimes lacking to be able to grasp what the Lord is trying to convey to us in this most exalted conversations that he is having with his great devotee Arjuna. So, we were discussing chapter 15 yesterday, and we said chapter 15, the Lord is laying out an escape plan for us. Now, we have come to this jail because we were disobedient, but the Lord is so merciful that he has accompanied us to this jail as Paramatma, and the Lord is even more merciful. He shows you the way out, provided we seek his help. And even if we don't acknowledge the Supreme Lord, the Lord is always there with us. He never abandons us. So, chapter 15 was all about the escape plan for those who are not ready to surrender to Krishna. If we don't have sufficient faith to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then Krishna says, I still have created a wonderful plan for you to get out of this material cosmos, which is by simply following the Vedic scriptures. They act as your GPS system or a map to get you from the material world and into the spiritual world, where you can go and connect back with your Creator, your Supreme Father, your greatest benefactor. And the Lord begins chapter 15 by giving us an analogy of a banyan tree, an upside down banyan tree with its roots up and its branches and leaves going downwards. So, this upside down tree has no substance. So, all aspects in this tree represent some element of human life. The branches represent something, the leaves represent something, the twigs represent something. We will get into that in just a few seconds here. So, one way to find out who the Supreme Lord is by just pursuing the path of Jnana Yoga. When Krishna says, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, I am the object of knowledge of the Vedas, and therefore Vedas are the means for us to get to know who Krishna really is. Krishna talks about the process of reincarnation, how based on our desires that we carry forward from one life to another, it's like the air that is going over a particular place. It just happens to carry the aroma of the place it's going over. So, similarly, Krishna says we carry our impressions from prior lives with us, and those impressions determine the kind of body that we take. So, we may acquire a particular kind of eye, a particular kind of ears, nose, etc. So, Krishna is first reminding us that our own desires is going to determine what body that we take. Our desires plus all of our past karmic reactions. And then briefly, Krishna talks about how he pervades the entire universe again, and that without him nothing can exist. He is the splendor of the fire, he is the light of the sun and the moon, how all of the planetary systems are simply floating in space because he has entered all the planets, how he gives flavors to the vegetables through the presence of moonlight. So the banyan tree essentially gives us two options. One is to go up, the other is to go down. If we go up the upside down banyan tree, then we're heading towards the spiritual platform. Unfortunately, if we go down the upside down banyan tree, then we're going to go into lower species or hellish planets. Because to go down means to degrade yourself. To degrade yourself means you have disregarded the Vedic scriptures. So if we follow the Vedic scriptures, you will be automatically on the path of elevation. If you don't follow the Vedic scriptures, you are going to degrade yourself. So, following the Vedic scriptures puts you on the divine path. Not following the Vedic scriptures puts you on the demoniac path. And the connection between chapter 15 and 16 is that there are those who are divine and there are those who are demoniac in this material world along with us. So we know that the qualities of the two kinds of individuals will vary. The word Ashwatha means banyan tree. It also has a different meaning. It literally means something that will not be here tomorrow. So the reflection of the banyan tree is temporary. The real banyan tree is in the spiritual world, which means your real life, your real pleasure, your real knowledge, your real bliss, your immortality actually exists in the spiritual world. You'll only find it there. You can search as much as you want and jump into the water looking for that fruit, except that fruit is just a reflection of the real fruit. You will never find that fruit in the reflection. Therefore, that reflection that we are preoccupied with is that hotel. The real thing is our home, and that's in the spiritual world. So Krishna is saying at some point or the other, we have to check out of this hotel. The only problem is that if you check out, you have to, if you still have karmic reactions, then you have to come back and check back into another hotel. It may be luxurious, it may not be luxurious. So Krishna is trying to tell us we should not make this hotel our permanent residence. Anyway, we cannot make it our permanent residence. And if we connect with Krishna, he becomes our charioteer and leads us out of this material world. So our vision should be to realign with Krishna, understanding that our place here is impermanent. Now, what is absolutely amazing about the Lord, anytime you check out of the hotel, you have to pay your bills, you have to settle the balance. If you take shelter of Krishna, he settles the hotel bills for you. You can walk out without paying a price. Of course, there will be some price that you'll have to pay through your karmic reactions in your current life. But if you've completely surrendered to Krishna, he wipes out all your past bills, your past karmic reactions. So Krishna is saying, if you're very intelligent, you'll take advantage of my offer. And all he's asking you to do is to surrender to him. So in case you're not ready to surrender to him, he has given us a path by which we can navigate our way back to the spiritual world simply by following the principles outlined for us in the Vedic scriptures. We have a temporary amount of time in this material world. And once we come across this real knowledge that is given to us in the Bhagavad Gita, then it is simply a matter of using our intelligence, create a plan, get out of jail, go back to the real banyan tree, go back to the spiritual world. So when we identify with our correct designation, which is first, that we are spirit souls, second, we are servants of Krishna, third, we will only be happy when we are serving Krishna. We will not be happy any which way else. So Mother Yashoda, when she finds out that Krishna has been stealing butter, he's been very naughty, the gopis come and complain to Mother Yashoda. Your Lala has done this. Your Lala has urinated in the puja room. Your Lala has pinched my baby, made my baby cry. Your Lala poured some water in my baby's ears. Your Lala set fire. So your Lala has done this. So every day the gopis would come to complain to Mother Yashoda. And somehow she never believed them. She always thought, no, my son is too sweet. Why would he do that? Look at his innocent face. So when the gopis would come to complain, Krishna would be hiding behind his mother's sari and poking his head around to hear the conversation with his eyes wide in shock. And finally, Mother Yashoda catches her son stealing in his own house, which sets the stage for the Damodar Leela when Mother Yashoda binds him. So she finally realizes, ah, yes. So the gopis have been speaking the truth all along because she has witnessed firsthand Krishna stealing from his own house and making quite a bit of a mess doing it. And she thinks to herself, my God, if he grows up like this, who will marry him? He's such a wayward child, he's so restless. Ah, yes, this Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is enacting being a wayward, naughty child. And so Mother Yashoda decides she must discipline her child. This is the sweetness of the Lord, where he allows his pure devotee to pretend or to assume, rather, the role of his mother and chastise him. So when we talk about the three gunas, the Rajagun, the Sattvagun, the Tamogun, the gunas by themselves are not bad. But understanding how the gunas influence us is important for us to get out from under their control. So, how do you get yourself detached from the material world is what is discussed here in chapter 15. So, the Lord uses the metaphor of a banyan tree. The leaves, the Lord says, on this banyan tree are the Vedic scriptures. The twigs, the Lord says, are the sense objects. The fruits on this tree are the Purusha Arthas, which are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And like this, Krishna is teaching us how to elevate our consciousness. So the tree, the reflection of the tree in the water, simply represents our material desires and our attachment to them. So Krishna is saying it's only your desire that's holding you back from making progress on the spiritual front. And Krishna advises Arjuna, you should use this weapon of knowledge to slash this ignorance. So, this tree that Krishna is talking about is being nourished by the three gunas. This tree is also imperishable, it is Prakriti. But then our attachment to these desires is not eternal. I mean, it's not easy to become detached from desires, but at the same time, it's possible for you to get detached from these desires. So, there are only two options that we have in Sanskrit, in Vedic scriptures. The two paths that we can follow are either it is Pravritti Marg or Nivritti Marg. Pravritti Marg means you are interested in following your material desires and trying to satisfy them. Whereas Nivritti Marg means you are only interested in satisfying Krishna. By satisfying Krishna, you are automatically satisfied. So there used to be this famous Vaishnava person. His name was Lala Babu in Vrindavan. And he also had another friend, rich merchant, who was also a devotee. So one day Lala Babu, along with his granddaughter, is attending some program, some drama. And in that drama, he hears about the futility of life. And his granddaughter gets bored and she says, come on, let's leave. And he decides, yes, let's leave this material world. So he's deep in thought and he wants to search for a guru in Vrindavan and seriously pursue the spiritual path. He finds a guru. He wants to surrender to the guru. But every time he would go, the guru would reject him. And he was very despondent, thinking, I've given up all my wealth. I've given up my family. I'm here in Vrindavan searching for Guru. And my Guru is rejecting me again and again and again. So he goes to the house of his friend, another devotee and a very wealthy man. So this Lala Babu had given up his wealth, given up his family, and was ready to completely focus on the spiritual path. It's just that Guru was not, for whatever reason, was not approving of it. So meanwhile, his other rich merchant friend, who is also a wonderful Vaishnava, he used to give charity every day. So every day outside his house, there would be a long line of people waiting to receive charity from this rich merchant. This merchant who was also a Krishna Bhakt. So he also goes and stands in line, hoping that he will get some help from his friend. Not monetary help, he was just looking for guidance from his friend, so he just stands in line. And as his turn comes, his friend recognizes him, embraces him, and he says, "Why are you standing in the line?" And Lala Babu says, "It appears that you have love for Krishna, but I don't have love for Krishna. Can you tell me how I can get love for Krishna?" And his friend says, "You already have love for Krishna. So how can I give you something that you already have?" So Lala Babu falls down at the feet of his friend and requests his blessings. And when he turns around, his guru was standing there saying, "Yes, I'm ready to accept you as my disciple now." What was the reason that his guru had rejected him before? Even though Lala Babu had given up his wealth, his family, when he approached his guru and his guru rejected him, he was thinking falsely, "Look at me. I'm such a rich man. I'm so detached from wealth. I'm so detached from my family. What a great thing I have done." So, Guru always knows what your inner feeling is. Externally, you may be exhibiting some symptoms of renunciation, but the Guru can figure out if that is real or that's fake. So, Guru wanted Lala Babu to reach that submissive state of humility before he would accept him as a disciple. So, externally, you can give up your material desires, you can give up your family, but internally, if your ego is very strong, then you are not ready to be submissive and serve your Guru. So, certainly, the Guru is always in an exalted position and knows when a disciple is not really in the correct uh, mood of service. So, this is the essence of the spiritual master as well. So, as you navigate that tree in which you've been trapped for so many years, Guru can help you navigate back to Krishna. So, Krishna talks about the transmigration of the soul, he talks about the spiritual world, and he also talks about how he is the maintainer of everything. And I was listening to His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and he was saying, Krishna is so merciful that even if we don't do anything for him, Krishna does everything for us. That Krishna does everything for us, even though we don't do anything for him. Which means Even if you don't accept that there is a God, still Krishna supplies you with sunlight, moonlight, air, the fire of digestion, everything. He does not withhold anything from you just because you have rejected him. So, this whole concept of jnana chakshu, the eyes of knowledge, is that the foundation to see God everywhere, in everything around us. Because if we cannot see God here in this material world, what are the chances that we will recognize and see God in the spiritual world? So Krishna is saying, I have arranged everything so beautifully so that you can acknowledge my presence here in the material world and prepare yourself to come back to me in the spiritual world. But if you reject me here, if you don't see me and see my presence everywhere and in everything, how can you hope to make progress? So that is Krishna's benevolence for us. And therefore, Krishna says, from him comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So let's say you want to learn how to drive a car. So to drive the car, you need knowledge on how to operate that vehicle, what to do. What do you need to remember when you're driving the car? You need to remember the rules of the road, what you should do and what you should not do. So this knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness, it's a precondition for us to act. Instead of forgetfulness, we could say we have to be absorbed in Krishna and therefore forget our material desires. So Krishna says when we take that step towards him, he gives us the necessary knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness to make progress. So Krishna has left a map for us in the scriptures. And in that process, we came across three particular shlokas that are called the Trishloke Gita. So let's read those three verses before we come to the 16th chapter, because this sets the stage for the 16th chapter. So this is called the Trishloke Gita, which is shlokas 16 to 18 of the 15th chapter. Krishna says there are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. Because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person. This is a summary of the Vedantas actually. It's also called the Three Shloke Gita. In chapter 10, shlokas 8, 9, 10, 11 were the Chatushloke Gita. In chapter 15, 16, 17, and 18 shlokas are called the Trishloke Gita. Essentially, there are two kinds of souls. The liberated souls are in the spiritual world. The conditioned souls are in the material world. And the Paramatma is the one overseeing everything here in this material cosmos. So we need jnana chakshushu to understand this. So the eyes of knowledge or the eyes of education. Education to remember what is important for us. So essentially Krishna is saying, say yes to Krishna and say no to material things. Rather, say yes to Krishna and don't worry about saying no to material things. Because if you say yes to Krishna, then slowly you yourself will begin to say no to material things. So it's not that we have to say no to material things before we can learn to surrender to Krishna. Krishna says surrender first, then automatically other things will fall into place. So this is the Trishloke Gita. We talked of the Pravritti Marg and the Nivritti Marg. The Pravritti Marg means you are following the path of Karma Kanda. Nivritti Marg means you are essentially interested in satisfying Krishna. So remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, all three come from Krishna. Knowledge, how does it come? Through the Chaitya Guru as Paramatma. Forgetfulness, for a beginning sadhaka, we have a tendency to forget Krishna. But for a determined sadhaka, Krishna will help us remember him. Through the Guru, we can remember how to stay connected to Krishna. So when Krishna dances with the gopis for a whole night, which is called the Rasa Leela, they danced for 4.3 billion earth years. Now, when you read the scriptures, it sounds like just one night. But the gopis were enjoying themselves with Krishna so much that Krishna expands time to allow them to experience that bliss of associating with him. So Krishna can expand time for his devotees. He can also contract time. So when Krishna was dancing with the gopis, they danced for 4.3 billion earth years before that dance ended. And that 4.3 billion earth years is one entire night of Lord Brahma. Similarly, there is an example of Krishna contracting time. So there was a very old person who was living in South India, and he wanted to visit Badrinath. He was quite old and feeble, and as you know, in Badrinath, they close for a certain period of time because of winter. So this elderly gentleman had reached Badrinath on the day that the temple was going to be closed. So as he reaches Badrinath, he sees the priests and others coming down the mountain along with the deity. So the darshan is closed on the day he arrives. So he asks the priests, when is darshan going to open again? And the priest tells him, not for another 6 months. Now, this elderly gentleman had reached Badrinath and now he didn't know how he was going to get back down. He was too weak, he was too feeble. So he decides to stay on the mountain. So it is said when Badrinath is closed, that's when the demigods go and start their worship for the next 6 months. So for the 6 months that we don't take darshan, the demigods are doing the worship and they take darshan. Just like in Puri, during the night time is when the demigods come, do their puja, take their darshan and leave. So similarly in Badrinath, when the temples are closed, the demigods come for their worship for those 6 months. So although the priest felt very sorry for him, they could not help him, so they leave him behind and they go down the mountain. He says, we will pray for you and hope everything will be okay. So what does the old man do that first night? He just chants the holy names of the Lord. And as night is falling, he sees a white horse with a man riding on top of it. And the white horse stops in front of him. The man gets down and he says, "Do you want some company?" The man says, "Yes." So they begin to talk. And they've been talking like this all night. They were playing some dice games. And finally, that gentleman on the horse leaves very early in the morning. And this elderly gentleman finally goes to sleep. And when he wakes up, he hears a big procession coming up the mountain. The priest is coming back and he's a little puzzled. He asks the priest, "I thought you said the temple is closed for 6 months. How come you back again?" And the priest says, "What do you mean? It's already been 6 months." And of course, the priest is equally shocked that this elderly gentleman survived for 6 months on that mount. The elderly gentleman was actually playing with the Lord. He didn't realize it. The Lord kept him company and simply contracted time for him, such that when he went to sleep and woke up, 6 months had already gone by. So, this is the power of the Supreme Lord. He can expand time for his devotees, he can contract time for his devotees. So, this is the essence of this particular chapter. Now, what is fascinating and interesting about the 16th chapter? Well, when you are in jail, in this prison house, you're there with fellow prisoners, isn't it? So, when you're there with fellow prisoners, you have to be careful which prisoner you choose to spend time with. Because some of the prisoners have a divine nature and some of the prisoners have a demoniac nature. So, you have fellow inmates here with you in this cosmos. Not all of them are devotees. So Krishna is going to focus his attention. So he's talked about the fallible and the infallible. He says those who are infallible, they live in the spiritual world. They are all liberated souls. Those who are not fallible, uh, or who are fallible rather, live in this material cosmos. So Krishna is going to focus his attention now in this chapter on those who live in this material cosmos, even among those who are not liberated and who have faults. Even them, Krishna divides them into two categories: the divine and the demoniac. Now, all along in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has been speaking about his devotees, the self realized souls, the great kings, the great acharyas. So, Krishna is going to spend a lot of time in this chapter focusing on the demoniac people that we are living with. Actually, both the divine and demoniac exist in us simultaneously. Our scriptures say that in Satya Yuga, the pious people used to live on one planet. The demoniac people used to be on a completely different planet. They were not even on the same planet. In the Treta Yuga, the divine and demoniac lived on the same planet but in different families. In Dwapar Yuga, the divine and demoniac were present in the same family. And in Kali Yuga, the divine and demoniac is present in the same person. Therefore, in Kali Yuga, we have to contend with two sides of our nature. sometimes the good side, and most of the times the not so good side. So, Krishna is going to define what are the demoniac qualities and then what are the divine qualities. So, the chapter title is Daivaasura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga. There are those who are Daivas and those who are Asuras, living on the same planet, and these particular characteristics is also found within the same person. So before we begin, let's offer our most humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today's acronym is DOOR. We are living along with inmates, two kinds of inmates, the divine and demoniac. How do we make sure we spend time with the right kind of people? Because that's going to determine our behavior, our conduct, our habits, our attitude, our value systems. So Krishna is going to talk about the divine and demoniac qualities in the first four shlokas. Then he's going to focus on the transcendental. And then the rest of the chapter he's going to talk about specifically how do the demons think. And then the chapter concludes with how do you overcome these demoniac tendencies. So let's see how the chapter begins. So this is chapter 16. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharata, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature. So here the Lord has described the qualities of godly people. And he calls them, they are of divine nature. In the fourth shloka, the Lord is going to talk about those with demoniac qualities. The Lord says, pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demoniac nature, O son of Pritha. So many good qualities you can have. But if you have these 6 bad qualities, or any one of these 6, Krishna says then we are demoniac in nature. I'm sure most of us are struggling with some of these qualities. Pride being one of them, anger being another, harshness being another, sometimes arrogance, sometimes ignorance. So Krishna is saying watch out for these 6 because these 6 are going to send you away from Krishna. They're going to take you away from Krishna. And Krishna says the transcendental qualities are conducive to liberation, whereas the demoniac qualities make for bondage. So what traps you in this material world, in the cycle of birth and death? Those 6 qualities. What liberates you? Or those qualities that Krishna has talked about in the first three shlokas. And as if to reassure Arjuna, Krishna says, "Do not worry, O son of Pandu, for you are born with the divine qualities. O son of Pritha, in this world there are two kinds of created beings. One is called divine and the other demoniac. I have already explained to you at length the divine qualities. Now hear from me of the demoniac." So when the Lord says, "I have already explained to you at length the divine qualities," all along the Bhagavad Gita, up to this chapter, Krishna has been talking about his devotees, about the jnanis, about the dhyana yogis, and what kind of characteristics that they have. So Krishna said, "I have spoken to you enough about all the good people, the godly people. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the demoniac people so you can understand how they operate." Hmm. First thing Krishna says, those who are demoniac do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truth is found in them. They say this world is unreal, with no foundation, no God in control. They say it is produced of sex desire and has no cause other than lust. Krishna is talking about the atheists here who reject God. Following such conclusions, the demoniac, who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence, engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. So Krishna is saying, these people, they have rejected me, they don't accept me, but all the work that they are engaged in is just going to put this whole world to destruction. Krishna says they don't have intelligence, they are lost. Although they may think they're doing great work, they are actually engaged in unbeneficial, horrible works. Taking shelter of insatiable lust and absorbed in the conceit of pride and false prestige. The demoniac, thus illusioned, are always sworn to unclean work, attracted by the impermanent. So they may engage in all kinds of activities that they have convinced themselves are really good, but in reality, they are not good conduct. They are not good attributes. They are not good type of activities. They believe that to gratify the senses is the prime necessity of human civilization. So there are some people who believe money is everything, being able to buy everything is everything, to satisfy all their wants and desires is everything. What is Krishna saying? Thus, until the end of life, their anxiety is immeasurable, bound by a network of hundreds of thousands of desires, and absorbed in lust and anger. They secure money by illegal means for sense gratification. Sometimes you become so crazy about money. You're willing to take loans, sometimes you're willing to scam people out of money just so that you can enjoy your senses. And now Krishna is going to talk like how a demoniac person thinks. The demoniac person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices. I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. Krishna is saying, in this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. They begin to think that they are the Supreme Lord. They are the controller, they are the enjoyer. Thus, perplexed by various anxieties and bound by a network of illusions, they become too strongly attached to sense enjoyment and fall down into hell. Self complacent and always impudent, deluded by wealth and false prestige, they sometimes proudly perform sacrifices in name only, without following any rules or regulations. Bewildered by false ego, strength, pride, lust, and anger, the demons become envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in their own bodies and in the bodies of others, and blaspheme against the real religion. So sometimes people come into power who reject God, and they begin to mistreat others and mistreat themselves. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, I perpetually cast into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Krishna says, well, those who are envious of me, I put them in very, very difficult situations. And I put them into lives where the entire species itself is demoniac. Attaining repeated birth among the species of demoniac life, O son of Kunti, such persons can never approach me. Gradually, they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. So, Krishna is warning us the further away we go from Him, this is going to be the result. And Krishna talks about the gates to hell. There are three gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. So, Krishna is saying we should do our best to avoid these three gates to hell. Lust. Lust means any desire that you have. If your desire is not satisfied, remember Krishna said in chapter 2, you become frustrated, you become angry. If your desire is satisfied, you think fantastic, and a new desire comes, and therefore that leads to greed. So Krishna is saying lust, anger, and greed are the three gates to hell, which means these are the three things, if we keep feeding it, they take you away and away and away, further away from Krishna. So Krishna is advising you. If you're a sane person, Krishna says you should give this up. Why? Because it degrades your consciousness. It leads to the degradation of the soul. The soul may have to go up, or rather go down and occupy lower species of life. The man who has escaped these three gates of hell, O son of Kunti, performs acts conducive to self-realization and thus gradually attains the supreme destination. So Krishna says, those who are aware that these three gates of hell, lust, anger, and greed, they try to avoid them. They try to practice some sadhana that puts them on the path of self-realization, and gradually they will make progress to the Supreme Lord. And the warning, he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection, nor happiness, nor the supreme destination. In every culture today, we have a preponderance of people who simply disregard the scriptures. They come up with things on their own about what is good and what is bad. They don't care for the scriptures at all. And what is Krishna saying about such people? Three things. They will not achieve perfection, nor will they be happy, nor will they come back to the spiritual. Why? Because they have rejected the scriptures and they've decided that they are the authority, sole authority, to decide what is right and wrong. And in the next shloka, Krishna says, the last shloka of this chapter, one should therefore understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. So Krishna is saying, you don't get to define what is duty and not duty on your own. It's already there in the scriptures. You have to follow what the scriptures say is duty and what is not duty. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that he may be gradually elevated. So, Krishna has talked about the demoniac qualities and their attributes, their behavior, their philosophy, their thought process, their rejection of the scriptures, how they succumb to temptations again and again and again. So, Krishna is saying if you want to avoid being this demoniac person, first thing you have to do is follow the scriptures. Don't make up rules on your own, because Krishna is saying that is not good for you. The first thing Krishna is saying is, therefore, first of all, understand what is your duty and what is not your duty as per the scriptures. Slowly, you will make progress. So, 26 divine qualities Krishna has talked about in the first three shlokas. And in the fourth shloka, Krishna has talked about 6 demoniac qualities: pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These 6 words we have to remember, because we don't want to fall into the trap of those 6. So, how do these qualities develop and what are the results of these qualities and what's the ideal solution for a peaceful society? So, the divine qualities, Krishna says, helps you make spiritual progress. It puts you on the path of self realization and liberation. So, freedom from anger, Krishna says. Right? So, if you're connected to Krishna, then all of you are united in service to Krishna, and therefore there is nice cooperation in the household. If there's no Krishna in the center, then everybody's ego will simply surface up. We're always fighting with each other. So, a family that prays together stays together. So, however, if we possess any of these 6 demoniac qualities, Krishna says there's no possibility of liberation. So, we now understand why the Bhagavad Gita is all about working on yourself. It's not about finding other people's mistakes, other people's rejection of scriptures, other people's not doing what you want. It has nothing to do with that. The entire Bhagavad Gita is you learning how to manage yourself first. First, work on your demoniac qualities. But we are very good at lecturing others when we have not fixed ourselves. So, Bhagavad Gita is all about learning how to fix ourselves first. Because when you realize you have so many faults, your mouth will not open to lecture another person. Your mouth will not open in judgment of another person. Because immediately the thought should come to your mind, I'm not perfect. How can I lecture somebody else? I first need to work on myself. I need to start with myself. One day when I am perfect, I can lecture. So, how do these qualities develop? Of course, whatever it is that you're born with, but after that, it is nature and nurture. Nurture means what are you inculcating? Who are you hanging out with? And then the other aspect is what is it exactly are you practicing? Every day, what qualities are you practicing? So, abhijatasya, Krishna says, these qualities you are born with. Therefore, in our culture, samskaras are so important, beginning with Garbhadana samskara. The reason we do the Garbhadana samskara is that one is you take the blessings of pious people and the elders in the family before you want to conceive a child, and you conceive a child in the mood of service to the Lord. That way, the child is born as a pious child. Because otherwise, children come out like, I remember His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj said in one of our lectures in our temple that everybody's child today is a Hiranyakashipu only. We have a lot of Hiranyakashipus running around because we have not given them proper samskaras. That's why samskaras become so important. So, what was Khayadu doing when she was pregnant with Prahlad in her womb? Narad Muni was speaking Harikatha to her, and while she fell asleep, Prahlad inside the womb was listening intently to his guru preaching Harikatha. Therefore, when he is born a pure devotee of the Lord. There's the importance of samskaras. So, when the child is in the womb, the child needs to hear from scriptures regularly on a daily basis. Then you have a very, very high chance of getting a pious child. Nature. Who do we associate with? What are we feeding? Which guna are you feeding? Demoniac is essentially Rajagun and Tamogun, and divine is Satogun. So, which element are you feeding? That is important. Which guna are you feeding? And of course, what do you practice? So, whatever you practice is going to influence you over a period of time. Only then you can rise to the stage of spirituality, right? So, Krishna is saying practice, 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 practice. You have to practice the good qualities and be very conscious of your bad qualities and see how you can avoid them. So the transcendental qualities are conducive to liberation, demoniac qualities bind you. So the results of developing divine qualities versus feeding the demoniac qualities. So what is the ideal solution? We'll come back to what we told you earlier, which is the ABCD formula. 1. Associate with devotees, because then you'll pick up the qualities and the energies from the devotees. They will be a positive influence on your life. Second one is to regularly means every day, to read scriptures for at least half an hour before you go to bed, and definitely at least for half an hour to 1 hour in the morning. That's why we have our morning classes, with the hope that you will join us and you will begin your day by thinking about Krishna so that the rest of the day is an inspiring day for you. So, attending classes is important, hearing is important, chanting is important, doing deity services, changing your diet is important. So, if every individual practices Krishna consciousness or God consciousness and every family does it, then the entire community will be filled with only divine people. So, that's the ideal solution. But Krishna reassures Arjuna, just because he is about to fight, that doesn't mean he is demoniac. He is born with divine qualities. So the problem with the demons is that they don't have faith in God. They engage in all kinds of sinful activities for the purposes of gratifying themselves. And they don't even realize that the Lord is sitting within them as a witness, quietly watching it. So just because you reject God doesn't mean that God has abandoned you. He's sitting there within you, watching you. So a demon doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. They don't follow Shastras. Their habits are unclean, not just externally but internally also. There's no sadhana there. Therefore, they begin to think, I am in charge, I am in power, I am the controller, I am the enjoyer. Therefore, they begin to engage in improper behavior, they become very self centered, and oftentimes they engage in illegal activities. So, the attitude of the demons is, I want to enjoy myself first. And because of that, Krishna says they will suffer immeasurable anxieties because they are trapped in this network of thousands of desires. So much so, they may engage in illegal means to satisfy their senses. So Krishna says, Atma sambhavitar stabdha dhanamanav madhanvitaha yajante nama yajnaiste dhambena vidhipurvakam. Self-complacent and always impudent, deluded by wealth and false prestige, they sometimes proudly perform sacrifices in name only, without following any rules or regulations. So even animal killing has to follow a proper process and procedure. Um, Therefore, anything that they do, they consider to be religious, but it is actually just a ritual. There is no religion at it because they concoct their own thing. And therefore, Krishna says, Avidhi Purvakam. They make up their own things. They disregard the scriptures. They think they are smart enough, intelligent enough to come up with their own rules and regulations. That is because of illusion. Illusion because of wealth or false prestige. Sometimes they may even take on a sannyasi robe but not be following any regulations. We have to be careful. We have to be intelligent and observant how that person is conducting himself in the sannyasi robe. That whatever they want to follow, you can make your own rules and regulations. There is no standardization. Krishna is saying there is standardization. It's already there in Vedic scriptures. In the IT world, we always talk about standardization. Everything has to be standardized. That way, everybody follows the same process. Krishna says there is standardization even in spirituality. Got to follow the scriptures. So, ultimately, such people, Krishna says, fall down to hell. So, what's our choice to remove all these demoniac qualities? Well, we need to first of all be aware of the three gates to hell, which is lust, anger, and greed. Trividham narakasyedam dvaram nashanam atmanah kamah krodha tata lobha tasmadetattrayam tyajet. Krishna is saying if you are aware of these three gates to hell, if you are smart, you are intelligent, you will give these up. Why? Because they take you down to hellish paths. And the last two shlokas, the results of not following the Shastras, there is no perfection, no happiness, no supreme destination, only degradation. If you follow the Shastras, then you can control and regulate your demoniac qualities. Simply by following the Shastras, you elevate your consciousness. So everyone has a choice. You can either reject the scriptures and act whimsically, lead a miserable life, and degrade your life to hell, or you can follow the scriptures, slowly get onto the path of self realization, this way escape the three gates of hell, and attain the supreme destination. So, the single word summary today is inmates. Krishna is saying, be careful, first of all, who you associate with. Two, be careful which qualities you're feeding and which qualities you should really be starving. So, to summarize, in the 13th chapter, Krishna is saying, I, as the Paramatma, can lead you out of this material hell. What is this hell? The three gunas, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamogun. But in case you don't acknowledge me as the Paramatma, well, why don't you begin your process by simply following the Vedic scriptures? Because that's your escape plan. And as you're doing that, be aware of the fact that we all have two kinds of qualities, the divine and the demoniac. Divine leads you to the path of enlightenment, and demoniac leads you to the path of degradation or hell. So, this is the essence of the 16th chapter. In the 17th chapter, tomorrow, Krishna is going to come back to the topic of faith. And we're going to look at three terms, Om Tat Sat, how Krishna talks about What is the essence of Om Tat Sat? You would have heard this phrase being recited by many sannyasis. So, what does this mean, Om Tat Sat?